and his presence and his place in our lives in many different ways, and particularly in the context of Orissa. So, Piyush, my first question, very simple. What prompted you to make this documentary, and what's the significance of the name? It's a beautiful lyrical name, and I wanted to understand what brought you to this point that you wanted to tell the story of the divine amongst ordinary mundane lives.
So thank you, Priyanka. And like growing up in Orissa, you cannot escape Lord Jagannath, and He's there in everything that we do. Even the first invitation from marriage to what we eat, to the cultural, as the film shows, many things is influence in the space of art, the culture, the history, the traditions that we follow. And as Gajpati Maharaj says, that he's like the head of our family. So that's there. Now, coming to the title, Monarch of the Blue Mountain, see, one thing that keeps resonating in various conversations is that he's a living God and he has a daily ritual and he lives like a king. If you think of Shiva, you think of the ascetic god.
Yeah,
He is a,
renounced the
yeah,
worldly lifestyle.
exactly. And here, if you see Jagannath, the food is, as they say in our Char Dham, that Badri is the Dhyan Kshetra, then Rameshwaram is the Snan Kshetra, Puri is the Bhojan Kshetra, and Dwarika is from where he rules. So yes, so that was there, and it actually also during my interview, the word actually phrase comes through one of my interviewees, Sheikh Makbul Islam, where he says that he quotes the Gita and he says, no, who is from wherever one is trying to imagine in whichever form he comes and uh, comes to brings that experience, and he says, so the monarch of the Blue Mountain, he uses this phrase, and I thought it caught on me because is very contemporary and so that was the whole idea. It's about again this point comes, there are two ways. Is asceticism the way to the path of
Salvation.
salvation, or you can be in the world and yet go that path? And that's what the Jagannath culture kind of represents. So that's why to celebrate it.
So, Jagannath as in the Lord of the world, the Supreme Lord of the world, the Supreme King of the world. And in your documentary, there were some very interesting facets of, the culture, the subculture that it has spawned. One of them, and because of my background from movies, I can't help but bring that in to the forefront of this discussion, but we'll come to other things also. It was very interesting that the documentary mentions that there is no film or show or serial which does not have, a presence of Lord Jagannath. It could just be a photo in a scene, or it could be an elaborate scene where the protagonist is dying and his family is praying for his life and salvation and so on and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that. How much is in back in Maharashtra and Bombay, we see a lot of the presence of Lord Ganesh, Ganpati. He's a local. I mean, like he's part of the Hindu folklore in a big way, of course. But locally, because of the Ganpati puja that is very popular there, and it's deeply entrenched in the way of life. He's a god who is evoked, in pop culture as well. So tell me something about this aspect of Lord Jagannath, which has seeped into pop culture, and brings a different kind of appeal, which is not necessarily religious, but it just becomes so much a part of your life that you don't even realize that it's there.
So because you talked about cinema and you brought in the reference of
Ganpati Bappa.
Ganpati. See, the first film, Raja Harishchandra, again, it tells that story from the epics. The first Oriya film was Sita Vivaha, which is about an incident on the marriage of Sita. And so, again, comes from the epics. But the second film, and which actually for many technical reasons, the first film is lost, but the second one that happened in 1948, Lalita, it's a story about the making of the temple, but it focuses on the a bit on the romance side of the protagonist Lalita and all. So the first story itself was about Lord Jagannath. Second film, the third film, then it comes Sri Jagannath again. So if you look at our, see, when cinema took birth in India, it started with that epic genre and the mythological genre. Here, the genre was around Lord Jagannath, and since then he's been there in films, in references, in prayer songs that are there in the popular culture, that have come through the popular culture. And as one of my interviewees says, with the film like Joga Bolia, where the characters are also named after him, and 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 since then we also have our scene like Aaj Kuch To Bahut Ho Gaye Tum, that
Right.
sequence in
Yeah.
Devar. We have a similar scene with one of our very veteran actors, Vijay Mansi, doing that. He's fighting with the god. And people, there are all the saint poet genre, the devotional genre, like Saint Pundalik was the other one, no? Like Raja Harishchandra was the first, and Pundalik was there. So the two genres. So in the Saint Point genre here, right up to Salabeg and all, the bhajans. And so now we also have to see what lends it to it. There are two things. One, everything about Lord Jagannath is larger than life, the Rath Yatra. So it is a very lot of cinematically things can be represented. And the other part, which is a core of our narration, the song and dance, are an integral part of this culture. Also, the prayer songs that are there, very moving songs. So they lend themselves to the cinematic
That's a very
media.
interesting point that you just made, and I'm going to ask you something about that, which is that we are seeing, and because you also are, a scholar of films, and you have specialized in film studies. I'd like to ask you that we are seeing a resurgence, if you will, of representation of folk deities, right? It's not necessarily religious, but it's related to, the folklore of the said region. And we saw that in the success of Kantara
Mm.
recently, which was about the forest god and, the whole pageantry around it. Why do you think that is happening? Obviously, like, I take your point that there is a certain beauty, a lyrical
Mm.
beauty to showing these pageantry, these traditions in a particular way. But what is it that you feel is making, these elements come back into the storytelling in cinematic form?
So, though I am not a religious scholar, but what I personally feel, again, the film has been a discovery because we, growing up in Orissa, we are, Jagannath is part of our life. We don't think much around it. We just go, we know the big events, we celebrate. But while doing the documentary and doing these interviews with about 30 plus people who are historians, who are anthropologists, literatures, critics, actors, and religious spiritual leaders. Many facets came out, and I think what is happening is, when organized religion every time takes a peak, there is a counter movement, counter culture, like the Bhakti movement happened, where
Yes.
it is about again personalizing the experience between the divine and the devotee. And I think that is what perhaps explains this. He can be a very personalized God. You can just take his three idols, install at your place, and you see, you go to people's offices, he's there everywhere here, in whichever form. That flexibility that he allows, and perhaps that there is a time. I mean, I think as society goes more and more distance, we need something personal and close to us.
Something to hold on to.
Exactly, and I think what exactly happens in a temple, because people, as we saw in the film, they're crying before him. They also go and shout at him, and so perhaps in a world where nobody else is listening to us, in our mind, at least he is listening to us, and that's again makes that personal bond strong. Because I was amazed to see that while shooting this subconscious flow of all the rasas around him. So, yes, I can understand people being very devoted and ritualistic and approaching, but somebody just shouting at him, saying that you're not doing anything for me, जैसे आप किसी अपने को डांट रहे हो. So that part of it, the way people hug him, and like normally we go and do a naman. Here everybody raises their hand. They all want to go and hug the Lord. And I think during the Rath like until couple of years, when people could go up the chariot, they would actually go and hold him. So there is a very personal, and that is that folk connect, because folk is all about that personal thing. No, before organized religion steps in and that barrier is created, that you can only go this far and no, not any further. But he is the only God who actually leaves the temple and comes out. And
That's such an interesting point that you make, that folk becomes very important when there is the organized religion sort of asserting its might, because this allows people across different groups to assert their bond with the Lord himself. And so that's a very interesting point, and we possibly that could be one of the reasons that we see this resurgence of the folk culture around various deities and gods and everything. Now,
And also, just to add
yeah.
there, even you see the way the Rath Yatra today is perhaps the most popular festival or a Hindu festival across the globe. Like about 200 cities all over the world, they have this. I mean, we have in this film short vignettes from London, Edinburgh, we show Berlin and all. Again, the thing is the same thing. Like people are singing, dancing, and like one of the interviews from ISKCON, Food for All organization, he says like, y- you want fun, you go to the Rath Yatra. Why do you want to go to the pub? You can do the same singing, dancing here and be yourself. And when we first saw it, my first encountering of Rath Yatra in London was Hyde Park, which is the main like road. It's completely sealed off. And from there, the chariots travel from Hyde Park to the heart of the business, London, to Trafalgar Square. And there they anchor. And then it is just celebration. And people just from all faiths, cultures, everybody can just dip in there. And I think that is such a great way to relate with divinity rather than through the ritualistic construct of not do this, do that, and that.
So I'm going to bring in
Yeah.
your perspective on this. Uh, we were just talking about Lord Jagannath and his, the folklore gaining popularity. Oh, he's always been popular, but we are seeing that resurgence in cinema and pop culture of various folklore stories. So we were just talking about that. And one of the points that Piyush made was that perhaps when there is organized religion, sort of making its presence felt, the counter is that you have folk, like folk deities also being upheld and celebrated even more so to assert that personal relationship with God. So what I wanted to ask you was that another very important aspect, revelry, as a form of affection and devoutness, is something that sometimes we tend to forget, because you're supposed to be deferential before the Almighty, before the divine. Has that sort of always been that, like in the context of Lord Jagannath, has it always been a very sort of personal relationship which is full of revelry, or has it evolved from a more, deferential relationship to what it is today?
I thought the questions were to only Dr. Piyush. I think there's a penalty that for coming late, is it? No, but if I may, Dr. Piyush, I think, uh, this is a very individual journey, right? And in the sense that all of us would have different equations with Jagannath, with Krishna. And also, this equation can evolve. So I don't think you can make a blanket statement like that. For some, it could continue to be reverential all their lives. For some, they probably there is a revelation of their relationship with Jagannath. Like I said, it evolves, and that's what we see when we see the relationship. You know, of the millions who gather during the Rath Yatra. It's at different levels, like what we saw in the movie. Um, so beautifully put. Some of them, they call him names, yes, whereas some you can see they're in tears. Some they just kind of give prostrated obeisance. So they are all at all of them are having their own equations with Jagannath, and to bring it down to saying that there's again no kind of a competition to prove the counterculture or the organized religion. I think then we completely dwell into another domain, which is not fair.
No, I don't think it's really a competition in anyone's mind. I think it's probably just a unconscious response. I don't think anybody in their mind is consciously thinking of it
Some of
also.
us do,
Yeah.
but right, the ones who are looking from outside, perhaps we tend to do it. They may not be
Because
doing it.
yes, another very interesting aspect that I found in the film was about his relationship, the Lord's relationship with his wife, you know. And there is that mention, Piyush, which is really sweet because it's got this animated, projections, and where she's upset with him because he's not taking her out. And he says, like, when he goes on the yatra, he's because the devotees want him to pay all the attention to them, and they cannot confide in him when his family, his siblings, and his wife are present. So when he goes on the yatra, he's by himself, and when he comes back to the temple, um, he goes back to his wife, and he, to appease her and to make up for that, he takes rasgullas. I thought that was such a sweet story, and please tell us something more about it. It was such a charming story and so relatable. I think all the way appealing to people because it's something they can relate to. So relatability, uh, to the divine lore. Tell us something about that, both of you. Piyush, you want to start?
You know that Rasgulla anecdote also helped solve a very technical issue in recent times. There's always been a debate like, was Rasgulla done by the Bengalis or the Odias? And so there have been a lot of claims, counterclaims, and then this tradition is what established it. Like this has been happening for years now, like hundreds of years. So this Rasgulla Bhog, and also as one of the sevayats of the temple kitchen who tells in the film also that's the only time food comes from outside. Otherwise, everything is cooked in the temple kitchen. But yes, and that's why I thought I'll go for the animation way because one, it makes relatable and it is such a human story. Again, reinforces that he is like us, and I think that's where we again we can relate more. But yeah,
No, I would say that there are two aspects to this. That reminds me of one statement from your movie, which Islam, who is Sheikh Makbul Islam, he makes so profound. I found it very profound. He says that this is not blind faith, right? And he says nothing should be blind faith. It's all based on a spiritual foundation. What's the import of that statement? There's so much to it, actually. The spiritual foundation, when he says, is actually hinting or pointing that direction, that in as much as we would like to believe that he's at our level, or we would like to relate to him in that sense, and it's so nice to hear all that, but still there is a spiritual foundation, which means that our emotions, if they need depth, then there is more to it. It's not merely a sentiment, and I would like to really um, enforce this point even when we are speaking about all the different things that people are sharing about Jagannath. It's a sentiment at one level, but then it becomes deeper as an emotion, which is based on spiritual foundations. Right?
It's that's one of the beautiful aspects that's shown in the film, that there's a very categorical sort of inclusion of people, and I think Devdutt Patnaik makes a wonderful point that this whole compartmentalization of religion, that so and so is this religion, so they don't, they will only practice a certain form of worship of a certain god, is something recent. It is not actually native and to the people of the land, because people, and we've seen this, like we were just talking about Ganpati Bappa in Bombay, in Maharashtra, and people of all faiths, actually worship Ganpati Bappa. People of all faiths worship, and you'll see this locally. I'm just giving the example of Mumbai and Maharashtra because I live there and I've seen that closely. But you see that, there's this old basilica over there, Mount Mary Basilica, and it has a lot of historical importance. And people of all faiths go there, during Mother Mary's, birthday and feast. And so it is in other parts of the country as well. I've seen this in Nasik. There's another famous church there, and people come from all over the country actually to worship and to sort of ask for their wishes to be fulfilled and so on, or people who are suffering, to release them from that suffering, etc. So I felt that that was a beautiful point. And and then there is that whole bit about Guru Nanak Dev and his presence in Orissa, and how that was never like, so it existed, or rather coexisted, in perfect harmony, and as an extension, not at odds, not in competition. So I'd like both of you to tell us a little bit more about this aspect of religion, or faith. Actually, religion has come to have different connotations, but faith, spiritual faith, that that has existed, and whether it continues to flourish, or has that changed?
So, as you rightly said, and I think Devdutt towards the end of that quote also says something like, in India, any place of worship which is open to all, everybody goes. So we have been not seeing these. Uh, I mean, just to add to the example of the Bombay, and in the previous session that we were with Ranjit, there is a poem on Haji Ali. And again, Haji Ali is like the Dargah attracts everybody. And I think as you brought in more examples like Nasik and all such places, be it Vaishno Devi, every place was always open and everybody went everywhere. I think it's a very recent thing to, and just look at the whole series of saint poets that or the saints who saw their idea of divinity in Jagannath. So you have Tulsidas, then you have Salabeg, who was actually a Muslim by religion, and then of course, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came from Bengal. And we have this idea of Ishtadev, and yet they could see, like Tulsidas ji saw Ram in him, and of course we see Krishna in him. So, and also Kali. There is an interesting point, which is many see him as the Shaktas, see him as Kali, and even the Ganapatyas, they see in him Ganesha. So that's something, both the formless and the form of deity. So that plurality, I think, was always there in our religious places. It's only in the present times that we have been creating all these barriers, and which are more political. They're nothing to do with faith, definitely. You
Anything to add there?
even
I
the
can just,
ISKCON experience, you could share something from that
yeah, I
perspective.
mean, that's quite clear. The ISKCON experience shows it quite clearly. It doesn't have to do anything with the body,
Hmm.
the bodily designations, right? Irrespective of, forget about the caste, the religion,
Gender.
the gender, country, nationality. It really doesn't matter. Like I heard this, when you talk about the sun, you don't say it's an Indian sun or an American sun. Sun is sun, right? And it sets and rises everywhere. So similarly is God. It's just that I wouldn't say right and wrong. I would say complete or incomplete. Our understanding could be incomplete. When you ascribe a certain, something, it's incomplete.
Actually, one of the most beautiful aspects of the documentary, the film, when I was watching it, was that I felt that it had an approach which one takes towards theology, and which is fascinating by itself. And you bring in multiple points of views on a particular philosophy, a way of thinking, a way of life, and you examine it in that sense. And that to me was the beauty of the film, and very very many aspects to it. And these were some of the aspects that I in particular found very interesting. But what we can do is we can take some questions from the audience and have our views, share our views on it. So please, the gentleman in the pink shirt. Yes, please watch it, but
Yeah,
whenever you get a chance.
yeah, definitely. I was very keen to watch, and it became very late when it got screened, and I had some other engagements, so couldn't. But where I'm coming from is like, as you said, Jagannath is an emotion which was then portrayed. The way we know it, the emotion first went from the tribals, then went to Jainism, Buddhism, Vishnu, Shaiva, the even the Kali form, Tantra, and then finally, went to the ISKCON's hand and got into a Krishna form. And fortunately, probably because it was more playful, was that the reason? Because of the romance and the playfulness, it was easier for them to propagate that culture, that emotion to various parts of the world, which the which wouldn't have happened had it just been a tribal. Is that one of the reasons why Jagannath is more popular in abroad as a Krishna manifestation than a just emotion manifestation? We've not been able to do justice there. That is one.
So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
that
an
is one part of the
interesting.
question.
That's a no. It's an interesting
Yeah.
question, and personally, I don't know. I mean, like I have known of Lord Krishna more than specifically as Lord Jagannath. I have, because that is something which is probably like locally that is a manifestation, but universally Lord Krishna is the wider known manifestation because of our epics and so on and so forth. And I think, as it is in our, like Vedas and everything, and in the epics, that these are figures which are open to interpretation. We always say that they have many dimensions, and so avatars are manifestations of the different sides to them in different situations. And perhaps because um the lovable, uh, like fun aspect of Lord Krishna is again very relatable, and so maybe it has got a wider sort of acceptance. People like to think of that aspect of the god in a particular way. So therefore, I think it finds a wider acceptance. I don't know, but personally, I don't think it's a deliberate thought. It's just that there was an expression of Lord Krishna in a particular manner, which is playful, which is innocent, which is also mischievous. He's not perfect. He doesn't lead the harsh ascetic life. So I think these things are relatable, and because we can say, okay, there's something of that in us also. So I think that makes that kind of makes it more accessible, if I was to use the word, and therefore it kind of is perhaps more popular among a wider section of people. I don't think there has been a deliberate sort of effort to propagate that thought as such. But I'd like you
I
guys to
can,
weigh in with,
yeah,
you'd have a more
I can tell you
scholarly.
exactly when Jagannath he came to the West. I can tell you, in terms of ISKCON. So it was in San Francisco when Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, um, he was just resting with in a small apartment after a little health issue, when one of his disciples, by chance, she saw this black doll in one of the Indian artifact shop, and she picked him up and she came to show it to Srila Prabhupada. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada saw the doll, she called him doll, he got up and gave his obeisance. And he said, "You've brought Jagannath." That's how Jagannath actually appeared. And then he said, he's always with his brother and sister. And then the disciple who was a Malti, she's called as Malti Devi Dasi, she says, "Oh yeah, I remember. There were 2 more dolls there." And so he said, "Go bring them also." So she goes back to the shop and brings them. And here were these 3 dolls who appear. Right? And that's when Prabhupada, he asked one of his disciples to, if he could carve a bigger, version of the same 3 dolls. And that's how the entire, the idea of the cart and the Rath Yatra all began in San Francisco.
Oh yeah. Am I audible? Check. Yeah, cool. So I had a couple of not questions as such. I am extremely inspired by. I'm Ashish Das, by the way. So I'm extremely inspired by the folk rituals that happens. I am from Ganjam, Brahmapur. So it's in a way like the birthplace of a lot of things, including Odissi dance. Like the Mahari dance or Gotipuo was earlier known as Sakhinata. So that was what was performed in Ganjam at one point of time, and then that came to Puri, and then that became Odissi. So yeah, so I wanted to just give a suggestion. Like you didn't highlight Pattachitra, unfortunately. That should be there. The only other way that people at one point of time used to get to know about Lord Jagannath, because not everyone, could afford an idol or would carve one like that, or with that kind of a spiritual energy to carve a god or goddess statue or a sculpture. So, yeah, then Pattachitra was the only point of reference for people to know about the particular culture. Even there is this particular village, Raghurajpur, where all these Pattachitra artists who have been practicing this from a long time. So, yeah, that's there. The other thing is the 10th incarnation of Lord Vishnu, that's the Kalki avatar. Especially the folk people who totally believe in folk forms of pursuing spirituality, they believe that Lord Jagannath itself is the first manifestation, if not the human, but the first manifestation of Kalki avatar. So could have totally highlighted that as well. So these are 2 suggestions. One more. When you wrote...
Sir, if you have a question, please ask.
I actually wanted to be invited here as a speaker, but none of your teammates got in touch with me. Unfortunately, I can't really tell you a question. I wanted to give some good feedback. That's also should be welcome, right? We're all thinkers pursuing different things.
Sure, sir.
So yeah, this is the last one. So when you write Nabba Kalebar, right? Just write Nabba, then hyphen, then Kalebar. That increases the readability of it by bounds. Right? We do have the liberty when we translate Sanskrit text into different languages, or even if you write Sanskrit text in English, right? The Sanskrit text, when it's written in English, it deserves to be highlighted or written capitalized with every word. Because Sanskrit as a language is such that even if you jumble up the words, the sense stays the same. So that's there. And then when you have all these hybrid words, right?
Sorry to interrupt, sir. We are really running short on time. Yeah. Really sorry, sir.
Thank you for your suggestions and watching the film. Yeah, very well taken.
Thank you so much for the insights, sir. In fact, Pattachitra started as Jatri Patti, if you don't know. It was a different form altogether, which was very raw and very rough in how it was painted earlier. And that itself had many forms. So thank you so much for a beautiful, insightful session on how we see Jagannath, how we have lived Jagannath for so many years, for over 1,000 years now. And we continue to love him as the Lord of the universe, and definitely a Lord that should be open for everybody to worship and, go look at. We'll move on to our next session. I'd request you to take your seats.